Hi, it's Marsh Engle. We're here with Amazing Woman Get It Done, and I have one of my favorite amazing women with me, somebody that I've known. I was trying to think about how far. Whoops, I've got my phone is broadcasting, simulcasting. I had two audio feeds at the same time happening, but back up and say what I was going to say is that I'm with one of my favorite amazing women that I was trying to remember how long I've known you, and I think I was living in San Diego at the time, I believe, when we met.
Yeah.
Can you remember what year was that? That was
that was probably 2001 or 2.
Yeah, a bit of time
ago. Maybe. Yeah.
And so what was coming to mind, I was thinking about that, is the evolution of our careers and the way we evolve through our learning and our studies and what that takes us to, because so many people right now are shifting and changing and finding new ways to express their creativity in the world. Yeah. So I think Laura Plum is the perfect person to invite in for that kind of conversation. So I'm so very happy to have you here with me today. And yeah, so talk to me about where did it all begin for you to lead to what you do today? Well, first tell us what your major focus is today.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to see you, to be with you, and to think back to 18 years ago when you were already so devoted to the amazing women of the world and to helping women realize their own amazingness. And talk about a commitment. Talk about someone who has really clearly seen what their path is and lived their dharma, lived your purpose. You are such an inspiration. Talk about amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've been on it for so powerfully, so clearly, so strongly.
Here is our 20th anniversary of the Amazing Woman programs and books and
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is really.
Yeah.
So
important.
To be fair to the conversation, though, there were several times that I wanted to shift away. And, when a calling comes to you, a calling isn't a good idea. A calling is a heartfelt commitment. And even when I wanted to shift away from the Amazing Woman movement, it would bring me right back. If I get discouraged, or if I think, oh, is there something different, or should I be focusing otherwise, it would bring me right back. So I think it's one of the ways we know we've really said yes to our calling, or our dharma, is it won't let go of us. It has a bigger power, a bigger energetic pull than what any kind of ego or any kind of overthinking might have. So one of the ways we find our calling and know that we're in alignment with our calling is that. So thank you for that. Is that the way you feel too? Have you felt that with the evolution and the way you express your work?
So I love what you say, and you asked me to talk about what I do, and I'll talk about that in a second because it relates to how I see the world. I work in natural medicine, basically, and nature's medicine. And so I see everything in terms of nature, and nature is such a great teacher for us and a great mirror for us. And I feel like when you said it was a great idea, but it's more than an idea, right? So I think of ideas as something that are in the air, right? They float past like a leaf or something that moves in the air. Our mind is said to have a lot of the air element to it. But a calling feels like the river. Like there's a river flowing through you. And that river, it's grounded, it fertilizes the world, and it's going to the ocean. No matter what, it's going to go all the way.
Beautiful description. It might feel like an idea initially. It might feel like, oh, isn't that a good idea? But then it somehow becomes amplified. And as we walk it out into the world, don't you feel that we embody it more and more? And that's when it becomes more that we can recognize it more as a calling.
I think so. I think it's something that, I don't stand outside myself and see it that way. You know what I'm saying? I don't see it from outside, but I think so. I guess it feels like it becomes a living thing. You're living it. You're the living embodiment of it.
Out into the world.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what a calling to me is that initially it might feel like an idea when we don't know the urgings that we're actually saying yes to. But when you do say yes to it, it really does become an embodied purpose.
When I met you 18 years ago, it was already a calling.
Thank you.
I mean, you could feel the power of it moving through you. You could feel the urge and the urgency of this calling that was knocking on your doors, and pulling in. It just felt like it attracted in. It was a powerful attractor magnet. Oh, I remember having some fun times laughing and giggling with you as well.
In San Diego, we were both in San Diego. You're still outside of San Diego, but
right.
we're
yeah.
I loved my time in San Diego. That was actually the birthing process for the work that I do today. It was really in San Diego. It's when I first spoke on stages. It's when I began to read books. It really is when I began to speak and coach. And San Diego was quite an inspiration. I think being close to the water is a good place for creativity.
Absolutely.
But, I was thinking today, self-care and self-love, how dynamically connected they are. They're almost one statement. Self-love is self-care. Self-care is self-love. Talk to me about your perspective on that and how you work with women.
I think to take what you just said and expand on it, it feels like self-love. We might be able to say self-love is a feeling. And then in the world that I live in, so I practice Ayurveda, yoga, Jyotish, these are all Vedic sciences. And the Vedic understanding of the world, there's this beautiful word, bhavana, B-A-N-A. And we don't really have an English word for that, but it's to make the distinction between our everyday human emotions and then the divine feelings, that feeling that of deep love for a child, love for another, feelings of compassion, feeling of great devotion, feeling of spiritual uplift, those emotions that are more divine, that connect us all to the one, that feel sort of joyful and yet grounding at the same time. That's self-love to me. It's a divine emotion, divine bhavana. Self-care is the action of that. It's the steps we take to remember that, to weave ourselves back into the fabric of that. Self-care, I also like to say, is world care, because there's this beautiful saying in the Vedas. There's 4 Vedas. This is from the Yajur Veda. It's Yata Pinde Tata Brahmande. In the microcosm is the macrocosm. In the smallest thing, in the atom, is the cosmos itself. In the personal is the universal. In the one is the all. So we say as above, so below, but it's this pattern that creates existence itself is encoded in each one of us. And if that's the case, then self-care is one of the ways we remember that. We remember our greatness. We remember that we are the cosmos. And another way I like to think of it is we have seeds of divinity within us. And if we have seeds of divinity, wouldn't we want to cultivate a soil that is rich and fertile so those seeds can grow? And the soil, you might say, is the ground of our soul, right? So we want to fertilize that soil. We want to make this earth body very well, a good earth, a good fertile field for not just for our seeds of divinity to grow, but what grows with that, our expanded genius creativity.
Yes.
Right? Our compassion and love and healing for the world and for ourselves. And that's where self-care is world care, because if we recognize that we are the mirror of the all, then anything we do that takes care of us ripples out into the all and helps us become a greater force for healing and wholeness into the world.
What comes to mind, there are 2 things that come to mind as you're speaking. The first is, why is it that maybe not so much today, but at times we have resistance to self-care? And the other is, the other question that I had that came to mind was, during this pandemic, during this time, do you find that we're leaning more in the direction of self-care? Is it because we have the time, or is it because we're starting to value it at a higher level?
Two big questions. Where should we start?
I think why is it? I know that there have been times in my life, not for several years now, but there definitely have been times in my life where I completely undervalued self-care. And I think it was when I was living in the time of the rush, of the stress, of the hustle, of the getting it done, of pushing for outcomes, which were very much ingrained. I grew up in an era. My early career was in an era. I was one of the women at the big table, and with all men, and so the mirrors around me said, "Push for outcome." Everything's based on results, and I think that my self-care was kind of went by the wayside, and I not for a number of years now, but I think there was a huge shift that had to take place, and a softening, and a valuing.
And look how this parallels, how this comes back to self-care as world care, because that way of living and working in the corporate world where it's all about outcomes and it's drive, and growth, and it's a drive that is unsustainable, has gotten us to where we are today, living in a global pandemic. On the other side, if we slow down and we take good self-care, taking care of the own earth body, that takes care of our bodies, our earth, right? The body of our earth. And that's why women need to rise, because we need a more feminine way of approaching life that is more sustainable, generative, and regenerative. And if you're, first of all, busy is one of the reasons why people forget. Another reason people don't do it or resist it is because they don't feel they deserve it. And I just think, even if you don't feel that you have self-love, or you don't feel you're enough, or you don't feel you deserve it, do it, because it helps take care of, it models for your children good self-care that we know you want for them. It models to your friends a way of showing up and being present and compassion that they probably could use too. They need that model. And it does resonate out into the world. Good self-care, individual personal care, impacts the larger world. And it's a revolutionary act, because the more that we slow down, the more that we take time to massage the body in the morning, let's say, simple things, the more that we take time to do these loving actions, the more that we are contributing to a world of human beings who are now willing to take care of themselves, but also who have the mindfulness. Really, it's a practice of mindfulness in many ways. And it's the mindfulness of good care for not just yourself, but for all, right? It echoes out into the all. And I love how you framed it. It's that corporate mindset. Drive. I don't have time for care. I don't care about me. I don't care about anything.
Yeah. My work actually started with a term that came as part of my calling, which was feminine success.
Yeah.
And you cannot imagine the pushback I had around that. They the advisors around me wanted to call it female success. They wanted to call it woman. I said, no, it's feminine success. I'm called to study, investigate, learn, and bring about a shift where we are living feminine success. And to me, that what is bringing in that piece that we're talking about that's so missing, which is how self-care and self-love. And for me, the way I see it is self-care and self-love just opens the door, the floodgates to creativity. If I'm in a place of stillness, if I'm practicing a number of the spiritual practices that I love so much, meditation that I love so much. We were just talking before we went live about being on Maui and being, just immersed in nature, what that does to my sense of connectedness and my joy of creativity. So I think that, maybe we don't often understand. I know the pushback of saying feminine, those two words together, feminine success, was profound, which, being the rebel that I am, pushed me even further into knowing that I was needed, must do this. I must understand it. And it was so early on, it was 20 years ago. And I can see why people, because the world we were living in, although I will say that we're still living in a world where feminine success is sorely needed and missing. And how can we, I think we're all, many of us now are speaking about bringing our receptive nature, our feminine nature. Talk to me a little bit about the way you see the feminine nature and the way it impacts. I know I'm asking big questions, but these are really, it's really a good conversation for us to have.
Yeah, and they're great questions. One of the things you were saying is we need to see more feminine success. I think we need to see more women not afraid to do it their way.
Mm-hmm.
To not say, I'm going to go have this job and I have to go fit that norm.
Mm-hmm.
But to say, this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to own what I call my own mental, emotional, and spiritual sovereignty, right? And from that place of sovereignty, I'm going to go forth. And I know that I'm my best when I eat well, when I sleep well,
Mm-hmm.
when I pause and take time to meditate, when I do my morning self-care practices. Mm-hmm. That's when I get the best out of me, and therefore you're going to get the best out of me, right? So for women to be fearless about this way of doing it, not to say anyone else needs to do it this way, but this is the way that is going to be most generative for me and for how I'm going to do this. That's where creativity comes from. Where does creativity come from? Creativity is the source of who we are, right? There's the creative genius, creative power that created us. And so when we take time for meditation or mindful walking in nature or slow down self-care practices, we're giving ourselves the gift of listening, right? It's a listening, you could say, with all five senses to something internal. We're listening to the heart. We're listening to the voice of the soul. We're listening to our emotions. We're listening to ourselves in a quieter way, in a gentler way, in a sweeter way, but in a deeper way. And when we do that listening, we can then adapt and adjust. We can respond skillfully to the needs of the moment. If we don't listen, we're stuffing, basically. So this is how we don't stuff, how not to stuff, right? So then it just explodes later. How not to stuff, how instead to listen, and to listen to the beauty of you. The beauty of you, you could say, is the ground of your being, right? Beauty is in nature everywhere around us. Nature everywhere around us, from her ground, is blossoming in beauty. And you have that inside you as well. You are everything. In Ayurveda, the science I practice, we say you are everything that nature is. You are as mighty, as majestic, as beautiful, as bountiful, as generative and regenerative. So take the time to come back to yourself and every day honor that with good self-care practices, because that's the source of your blossoming, of your creative genius and your growth. That's within you. Honoring
part
that.
of what I see self-care, and you touched on it a moment ago, is walking into the boardroom as the fullness of who we are,
Yes.
and not leaving anything on the side for fear that it won't be accepted or appropriate. Or I feel like part of our self-care is to use our voices to give freedom of the flow of what we know, the wisdom that we're bringing forth, the ideas, and big changes. All new ideas come from that freedom, that flow of that creativity, so that when we innovate, it's not because we're living as we've known, it's because we're opening the flow of what possibilities can be. So I think that for me, self-care encompasses everything that we can do to balance, bring into ease, bring into more grace, bring into create an environment for ourselves where creativity is actually flourishes. So it's not about making creativity happen, or it's not about making anything happen. It's about allowing it. So in a sense, a calling, we were early in our conversation, we were talking about our callings, and early, I believe that it's when I felt a calling, it was because there was enough of a pause, of a surrender to the grace that I can now say was my own self-care, that surrender to, I don't know, let me open up just long enough to get a peek. And I did not realize what would come through that, but I can remember the moment, the exact moment when it came through. Very, very clear.
So beautiful.
And it was in a pause. It was during a pause.
Nice. So would you say pause is one of your key self-care tools?
Oh, most definitely. Pause is definitely any of the transformational clarity that's come in has always been during that time of pause. Now I have practiced pauses early on. Life has a way of giving you a pause if you don't honor the sense when it comes to you. So I had some forced pauses, and now I have pauses daily. If there's a day that I feel over focused to where it's just driving too hard, driving too focused, I create an intentional pause, or I create intentional pauses without there even being a need for the pause, just because I know it's so incredibly healthy and such an opening for our creativity. It's, I do a lot of career coaching, business coaching, and 50% or more, I would say 50% or more is spiritual practice. Spiritual practice. What are you doing for your spiritual practice? Because the idea of accomplishment comes so easily when we're open in flow. We're in space.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That reminds me of Einstein, and he apparently, nearly failed all of his classes in school. He didn't have a traditional genius brain or mind, but it turns out that his genius came from his thought experiments when he would sit down in his favorite chair and close his eyes and just let his mind wander and go into a pause.
Oh, I love that.
Then he would have, it's his genius is very intuitive, right? And it came from him getting very quiet and just giving himself a break from the focus and just letting his mind, and creativity and creative genius came through. I love that. Yeah, I love that.
I once remember an intuitive insight, talking about Einstein. I remember an intuitive insight that came to me once and said, that my ideas weren't necessarily accepted early on because I created from the place before people realized there was even a need.
Yeah.
So I believe the feminine creates from that space of creating before we realize there's even a need. So that's where believing in ourselves is part of our self-care. Believing in ourselves, believing in our intuitive ideas, believing in what we see for the future, our visioning. And I think it's so powerful. And I didn't mean to interrupt. I want to hear what you were going to say.
No. You're absolutely right. I think that's so important. It goes back to this feeling that I think is a theme for us today is women believing in themselves, women cultivating the courage to go their way, to be that sovereign being, that sovereign creative force. And all I was going to say is that the female brain works slightly differently than the male brain. For instance, in terms of meditation, what I see in women is that they can be perfectionists. So I think it's great that so much of the coaching is on the spiritual path, because so many women are perfectionists and they've got to get every last detail right. And so often they won't show up until every last detail is right? And sometimes it's just about showing up when it's half complete or 75% complete, right? Because creativity continues. It's a font, it's a river, it's a stream. It just continues to flow. So just because you may not be complete doesn't mean that this is your last chance. There's going to be many chances. Creativity will keep going as long as you don't stop it. And that's the thing about the feminine. If light is a particle and a wave, the male brain is a bit more the particle and the female brain is a bit more the wave. So we are actually, our meditation, our greatest genius and creative ideas can come when we're in motion, but singular motion. So because we have a tendency to be, holding the child in one hand while we're fixing dinner, while we're on a corporate boardroom call, sort of thing, we've got so much going on all at once. When we go into a singular motion, so whether it's dance and we get into sort of an ecstatic state through dance, or chanting, sort of devotional singing, or for somebody it might be painting or gardening. But if we get into that kind of state, cooking, that's where a lot of our great ideas can come through. This is so whereas the yogis of old, who were mostly men telling us to sit still for an hour and focus, that's fine. But for the women, it was more of a tantric practice or a bhakti yoga practice, where they were a little bit more engaged in life, in nature, but in a singular way. And it's through that flow and that movement right? We're keeping the flow going, as you said. It's about maintaining that open flow. And for a lot of times, it's about moving the body. It's about expanding, right? About feeling the flow literally move through the body and making sure that we're keeping all of our energy centers alive and open and fluid and connected.
I can remember one of my practices when I had a marketing agency that had, just a lot of clients and a lot of staff. And I had my office and we'd encounter a challenge or a problem. And I would get up from my desk, and this is before I realized anything that we're talking about, but I would get up from my desk and I would walk in a circle around my office just to get moving. And then the second thing I would do is I would move into a chant that I did not call a chant at the time, but the chant was, who do I know? What is the answer? Who do I know? What is the answer? I use that to this day, but I understand now what I'm doing. Before I just didn't. I just did it as a practice where it would be just, let me get up and move and let me tune in to where the answer's sitting.
Tuning.
So I think it's interesting that there's aspects that all of us are guided to open our creativity, to open up our feminine nature, to open up more of our receptivity and more of our intuitive intelligence. And we may be putting those into practice and not even realizing what we're doing, but we're being led in that direction.
Right. It's often the thing that people say, well, when I'm not working, I'm doing this. Or it was when I was painting that I had this genius idea that's more than an idea. It's actually a calling. You're absolutely right. Maybe that's what I was just talking to someone earlier, and she said, how do we get ourselves to consistently show up for our practice, whether it's meditation or whether it's self-care? What do we do when we have those moments of resistance? Going back to what you said earlier. And I was saying, well, just look for the delicious in it. Look for the delight in it. Look for the joy in it. Look for the beauty in it, right? Let yourself be called to it because it's so delicious and delightful and beautiful and sensuous. You can't say no.
So good that for me to miss a meditation, I can't imagine it. It's for me to miss the opportunity to connect more deeply and more present. I can't imagine it. And it's because I've seen, I think the level of value that I have for it today, in contrast to, maybe I always had value for it, but was in an environment at the time that did not value it. So it was a little bit of a challenge for me to actualize it or to let it be seen. And I think we're speaking about what you said earlier. It's women walking into the boardroom, walking into their career of choice, standing strong and tall and brave and powerful and fully expressed in her feminine, and not need the approval or not need to justify why or just because she is. That to me is where we are today, and encouraging more of that as you do. If there were one or two ideas you could share before we say goodbye for today, one or two ideas you could share about everything you teach.
A quick thing for people to think about is that you matter and you're needed and you are exactly what the world needs, exactly as you are. So your authenticity, your creativity, your intelligence, it's yours alone. No one else has it, and we need it. The world is not created by accident. The world is created, as we believe, from this creative source, this infinite intelligence. It created the world on purpose. It created you to come alive in this world on purpose, to bring forth your gifts. I love what Picasso said. The meaning of our life is to discover our gifts. The purpose of our life is to give them away.
Yeah.
So you are alive on purpose to know the beauty, the magic of what you are. And so never shy from that. Let yourself shine. And the self-care practices are a way of every day polishing the diamond, right? So one of the things I love, and just as we brush our teeth every day, we learn to do that every day, and now we won't do it. We won't not do it, right? So one of the things I like to do every day is I would just give one simple practice: massage your body head to toe with an oil. Sesame oil if you tend to run cold, coconut oil if you tend to run hot. And if it's summertime, coconut oil is better. If it's wintertime, sesame oil is better. But just take a little bit in your hand, warm it up, and then if you don't want to wash your hair that day, you can just put a little drop right in the middle of your top of your head, your scalp, face, ears, a little bit in your ears, a little bit in your nose, down the throat, circular motions around the joints, up and down strokes on the bones, all the way to your toes where your feet have a lot of nerve endings, so you want to make sure you get your feet. This is deeply nourishing, stimulates circulation, stimulates the metabolic fires, stimulates the lymphatic system. It'll help awaken the brain and the mind, but it's also nourishing to the tissues. There was research coming out of New Zealand shows that sesame oil daily massage can help halt the progression of Alzheimer's, may have an effect on Parkinson's, and it may even not only halt the progression, but they're looking at research now whether or not it can even help to reverse it. And that's before we've added turmeric to our oil or any other kind of herbs. Just straight up sesame oil is able to do that because it crosses the brain-gut barrier and goes straight to feed the deeper tissues of the body. So that's my one thought. If I can give a second one, it's no negative self-talk. Anytime you catch yourself in any kind of negative self-talk, figure out a mantra, whether it's I am, or who do I know, what's the answer, or this is a beautiful world. Figure out a mantra, make that your go-to mantra, and anytime you find yourself having a negative self-talk, pull out that go-to mantra and replace the negative with a positive. And pretty soon the brain will automatically start to do that. So it's really important to train your brain, right, to work for you. Your brain is a tool. Mind is a tool. Make it work for you rather than taking you out and all over the place. Don't let your mind tell you you can't, because you can, but make it work for you.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Laura, I feel like I'd love for everyone to know how they can connect with you. You're a wealth of inspiration and a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. Can you share your website, or where can people reach you? Where's the best place?
My website is lauraplum.com. So it's LAURAPLUMB, one word.com. And there's actually a free 10-day self-care program there if you want to sign up for that. And so that's just very simple. Just scroll down the homepage and you'll find it. It's a 10-day small little booklet, and then you'll get 10 days of email inspiration. I've also done a self-care Instagram live recently. So that's on my Instagram, which is also at Laura Plum. And where else? Here on Facebook. I'll hang out with Marsh. I'll be liking Marsh's things, so you can find me here. I think amongst your friends.
That's fantastic. I so love seeing you. Let us not wait this many years ever again to connect.
I have a book, Ayurveda Cooking for Beginners, which is also a great way to give yourself self-care in the kitchen.
Oh, fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
So much love. Thank you so much. I know you have a full day, a full schedule, and I just so love connecting with you. Thank you so much.
Terrific
for being part of what we're creating.
Thank you. And Marsh, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for supporting not all these individual women, not only them, but the divine feminine herself, because truly she needs to rise. And then we get that balance of the divine masculine, divine feminine. And Ayurveda, my medicine that I practice, teaches that any living system restored to balance, any biological system, ecosystem in homeostasis can regenerate itself, can spontaneously heal. So this rise of the feminine is essential for our world to restore its wholeness and wellness.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Bless you. Bless you.
And you love. Bye-bye.